Coffee within 90 minutes of waking supposedly stacks a hormone spike onto an already acidic stomach. But the fastest, most measurable thing coffee actually does to your gut happens in about 4 minutes flat, and it has nothing to do with that hormone at all. 4 minutes. Not 90. Somewhere, you have probably picked up a version of the rule that is built entirely around the first number and never even mentions the second one. Wait 45 minutes before coffee. Wait 90 if you can manage it. Let the hormone spike come down first. Never on an empty stomach. And once you actually see what is happening in that 4-minute window, the whole 90-minute rule stops looking like settled biology and starts looking like something else entirely. A rule that isn't technically wrong, just wildly incomplete. Let's be precise about the rule as it is usually delivered, because the precision is exactly where it starts to fall apart. Version 1. Cortisol, the hormone your body releases right after you wake up to spike your alertness, climbs sharply in the first 30 to 45 minutes after you open your eyes. Caffeine, the theory goes, adds a second cortisol spike directly on top of that first one, so you should wait for the first spike to pass. Version 2. Your stomach is sitting at its most acidic point of the day first thing in the morning, and coffee just pours more acid into an already hostile environment. Version 3, the strictest version. Don't touch coffee at all until you have eaten, because food acts as a physical buffer, slowing down how quickly acid-triggering compounds reach your stomach lining. Each one of those 3 statements is technically true when you isolate it. Cortisol does spike in the morning. Coffee is acidic. Food does slow down digestion. But string all 3 together into one blanket rule, and you get something that treats every single cup of coffee, every roast level, every person's years of tolerance, and every individual's actual gut chemistry as identical. Biology essentially never works that way. It doesn't average people into one universal timer, and it definitely doesn't hand out the same 90-minute prescription to a beginner and someone who has had a cup at 6:50 a.m. for 3 decades straight. The actual shape of the problem with this rule is that it takes 3 real facts, sands them down into one number, and applies them to every single person regardless of what coffee they are drinking. Here is the truth sitting underneath all 3 versions of the rule, the one that gets skipped almost every single time this topic comes up online. Coffee's fastest, most reliably measured effect on your digestive tract isn't happening in your stomach at all. It is happening in your colon, several feet further down your gut than the rule is even looking. And it isn't driven by acid, and it isn't driven by cortisol. In 1998, a gastroenterologist named Satish Rao ran a study that gets cited constantly inside gut health research circles. 12 healthy adults volunteered to have a 6-sensor pressure probe threaded into their colon. Science requires sacrifice. To continuously measure the pressure waves your colon generates every time it contracts. Over a 10-hour window, each person was given, in random order, black coffee, decaf coffee, plain water, and a full 1,000-calorie meal. The caffeinated coffee produced colonic motor activity roughly as strong as an entire meal. Not a splash of water. An entire meal's worth of contraction from a single cup. It measured out to about 60% stronger than water alone. And here is the detail that should genuinely stop you. Decaf coffee produced a similar, only slightly weaker response than the real thing. If this were purely a caffeine effect, decaf should have done almost nothing at all. Instead, natural compounds in the coffee were triggering the gastrocolic reflex, a built-in signal your colon runs anytime food or fluid lands in your stomach. Coffee appears to fire that reflex harder and faster than almost anything else people put in their mouths in the morning. Think of it less like flipping a light switch and more like a starter's pistol at a race. The sound alone gets every runner's legs moving before a single foot has actually left the starting block. Coffee is the starter's pistol for your colon. It fires the signal within minutes, completely independent of whether real digestion has even had time to begin. This is not damage happening to you. This is your gut doing exactly the job it was built to do, running on a schedule that has nothing to do with a cortisol clock. Dr. Rao's team found the increase in colonic pressure showed up within about 4 minutes of the first sip and lasted for roughly 30 minutes afterward. For the people who feel an urge to use the bathroom shortly after their first cup, that isn't a warning sign of anything going wrong. It is the exact reflex this study measured, showing up right on schedule. There is one more piece worth knowing because it undercuts the cortisol side of the myth just as directly. In 1999, Dutch researchers tested what happens to morning cortisol when you change nothing about food or caffeine and only change the light hitting someone's eyes. 1 hour of bright, white light in the morning produced a 35% increase in cortisol compared to staying in dim light. That result matters because the 90-minute rule treats cortisol like it is exactly one dial, caffeine. It doesn't. Whether you are standing near a bright window, walking outside, or sitting in dim indoor light during that first hour is already independently steering your cortisol curve. Caffeine was never the only variable in the room. Quick one before we go further. Do you drink light, medium, or dark roast most mornings? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and it is going to matter a lot in about 2 minutes. So if the gastrocolic reflex isn't the danger, and light is already doing some of the cortisol work, why does the 90-minute rule still feel so specific and so urgent? 2 real forces are working against you here. Force 1 is tolerance. In 2005, researchers measured cortisol responses to caffeine in habitual coffee drinkers versus people who barely touch it. The habitual coffee drinkers showed a meaningfully blunted cortisol response. Their bodies had genuinely adapted to the daily exposure. Picture a smoke alarm mounted right next to a toaster. The first few weeks it is installed, everyone in the house jumps every single time it goes off. 2 years in, nobody so much as looks up. The 90-minute rule is doing real protective work for someone in their very first week of a new coffee habit. For someone with a 5-year habit, the size of that second spike has likely already shrunk down to something barely measurable. Force 2 is roasting chemistry. A research group at the University of Vienna has spent well over a decade mapping exactly which specific compounds in coffee stimulate stomach acid and which ones actively suppress it. Certain natural compounds push acid output up. But a completely separate compound, which we can call NMP, forms only during the roasting process itself and actively tells your cells to ease off the acid production. In a study tracking these compounds, volunteers were given either a dark roast blend or a medium blend. Both matched exactly for caffeine. The dark roast blend stimulated measurably less gastric acid secretion than the medium roast. Same bean species, same caffeine dose, but a meaningfully different acid response, purely because of how long the beans sat in the roaster. 2 coffees can hit your stomach like 2 completely different keys in the same lock. The 90-minute rule never once mentions this because, wait 90 minutes, is a simpler sentence to write than, check your roast level. Cassie is 44, and about 8 months ago, she watched a video advocating the 90-minute rule. She decided that same morning to become a 90 minutes person, cold turkey. Day 1 was fine, mostly on adrenaline. She pushed her first cup to 8:20 instead of her usual 6:50. Day 2 was harder, a flat, foggy stretch through her 8 a.m. meeting. By day 3, she was getting a mid-morning headache around 9:30 because her body had spent years expecting caffeine to arrive at 6:50, not suddenly at 8:20. By day 4, she started setting a second alarm just to remind herself not to reach for the pot. By day 5, she noticed she was short with her team on an early call. By day 6, she caved, had coffee at 6:55 exactly like always, and felt a wave of guilt about it. Her stomach was completely fine, but her calendar of self-imposed rules was not. What actually changed for Cassie wasn't more willpower. It was information. Once she understood the real mechanisms, she stopped fighting her own clock. She kept her coffee timing exactly at 6:55, same as always, but swapped her regular medium roast for a dark roast blend from the same brand, measurably higher in NMP and less acid stimulating. To make it even easier on her stomach, she simply enjoyed her coffee alongside her normal breakfast instead of delaying her morning ritual. By day 4, the mid-morning withdrawal headaches were gone entirely. By day 7, she noticed she had stopped setting that second alarm because there was nothing left to resist. By day 10, her stomach felt perfectly normal, just as it had for the 5 years before she ever heard the 90-minute rule, except now her morning came with a dark roast bag instead of a stopwatch running in the back of her mind. 3 weeks in, she had genuinely forgotten she used to feel guilty about any of this at all. None of that took a stricter rule. It took a different bag of beans and letting go of a clock that was never actually measuring the thing it claimed to measure. The myth was never really about the coffee. The myth was that timing was the only dial anyone told you that you had. Your stomach and your colon have their own built-in reflexes that don't care about an arbitrary online timer. The danger was never the clock on your coffee. It was the misunderstanding of your biology. Every week on this channel, this is exactly the depth we go into. The real mechanism sitting underneath the popular rule, not just the headline version of it. Subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next one. That is the only thing this channel does.